Joining me now is the play-by-play commentator for Pancrase MMA. He, of course, can be heard on all of the broadcasts on UFC Fight Pass. It is Stewart Fulton here on the show for the very first time. Stewart, thanks for the time. How are you?
Great. Yeah, thank you too. Likewise, it's a pleasure.
As we said off air, it is just past 11 a.m. in where you live in Tokyo, Japan. It is just past 8 p.m. where I am, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. What's your morning looking like right now? I know you have, how many kids, do you have one kid or two? I know when I asked you to do this at 8 a.m., it was too early because you had to take care of the youngins.
That's right, yeah. One in elementary school, one just finishing up at kindergarten. So, yeah, I had to take care of them, get them ready and sent off to school. So I'm back in the house. I teach an English writing composition course. So I've just got a bunch of second drafts through that I'm grading right now.
Nice. So why are you not at school teaching right now?
We're off today. This is actually the spring break for most of the Japanese universities. But I still work at one university which follows the American system, which is why I still have classes and work to do there. But luckily I can work from home today.
Would you like to, out of curiosity, like if you were, because I mean, I feel like going to Japan, teaching an American university, American sort of style school, would you like the full experience and to teach at like a all sort of Japanese style school and, you know, have their breaks when they do, you know, spring break and things like that? Or
well, that's what I'm mostly used to be honest. I just took this new job last year, which is quite different, but I'm more used to the Japanese system.
Is it difficult to balance teaching this English class with play-by-play for Pancrase, or because Pancrase doesn't put on a show, say, every week, is it pretty easy to balance?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to balance, to be honest. I'm mostly busy just weekdays and during the day, so, you know, my evenings are a lot more flexible, my weekends are flexible, so I can do other of my own writing and preparing for commentary for Pancrase and whatnot.
When you say your own writing, do you actually write articles for Pancrase, or are you just preparing for the, like, writing notes?
Yes. Yeah, well, I've been writing articles on Pancrase for a while now, but just really for my own fun, really, to be honest, not as part of the job, but I just had one published on UFC.com, so I'm quite pleased about that.
Oh, wow. I wish I had seen that. I'll have to go and check that out afterwards, but I did not see it. So was it just like a preview of the card, I would assume? Yeah,
it was just a preview piece for the 293 event that we did on Sunday there.
Which we'll talk about a little bit later, because obviously a great event. The main event particularly stood out among the rest and might stand out among a lot of MMA action, UFC included, by the time we're talking about 2018 MMA awards. I know we just, you know, the year just started, but obviously that was a terrific main event, which we'll talk about. But I want to talk about like how you got into commentary for the first bit. You know, what's your background? Did you go to school for broadcasting? Have you always wanted to do this? Or I know some jobs just sort of come out of nowhere. How did this come about, you becoming a play-by-play man for MMA?
Yeah, good question. It was a interesting set of events that all fell into place for me. I've been involved in martial arts for 20 years now. But really just at the start, it was for my own hobby, my own fun. And then I started enjoying it so much, and MMA as a sport started to grow. And that was when I decided that I'd like to compete and see if this mixed martial arts stuff actually works. So I got the chance to do that when I came out here back in 2001. I did some amateur 2002, turned pro 2003, fought my last fight 2010. Throughout that whole time, I was involved in other TV work, various live TV programs, a couple of comedy things, TV commercials. So I started to get experience in broadcasting that way, but it was never my intention to get involved in the entertainment industry as such. It was really, the light came on back 2015. Was it 2015? Yeah. And I was over in Scotland. I got a message from my good friend Lenny Hart, whose voice everybody knows. And she mentioned that Pancrase had struck a deal with Fight Pass, and they were looking for commentators. So she knew that I'd been out here for years. She knew I knew most of the fighters and the gyms, and I speak Japanese also. So it seemed like it was the job for me. So I was over in Scotland for about a month at that time, but I spoke to the agent over here and came back over after my vacation and sat down with the agent, and that was when they explained what was going on. And like I said, the light lit up, and I thought, this is the job for me. I can do this. I'm ready. So that was the start.
So when you did your first show, because it was sort of your first time, you'd never done anything. I mean, you did the TV stuff, as you said earlier, but like as far as the commentating, play-by-play, this was new to you. Was it nerve-wracking? Did you feel like you sort of, not to, but do you feel like you hit the ball of the park on your first try? Did it take a lot of work? I mean, admittedly, were you bad the first time? How was that first time?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I was nervous, to be honest, because Pancrase is such a big deal. You know, the history behind it, it's legendary. You know, and the fighters who have fought and the champions who've come out of Pancrase over the years, and some of the legendary fighters who are still active. I've been looking up to the organization and these guys for years. I wanted to do a good job, so I had to study some commentary skills and make sure that I practiced. And the first event was quite nerve-wracking because the opening was all on camera, and the CEO, Mr. Sakai, wanted me to do the in-cage interviews with the fighters also, and because it's going out on Fight Pass, plus the audience being predominantly Japanese, I had to translate. Well, I had to interpret, basically. Now, although I speak both languages, it's quite a different ballgame when you're having to interpret on the spot, you know. So that was really nerve-wracking. That was the big challenge, because you're in the middle of commentating. Then there's a winner. I've got to take the headset off. The other guy's got a cover for me, and I've got to run up to the cage and start thinking about the questions I'm going to ask and how I'm going to translate them, and then translate the answers, you know. And it wasn't just Japanese fighters, you know. We had Brazilians, we had Russians, we had Spanish speakers. It was a wild ride at the start, because you're standing in the cage and the languages are bouncing around, you know. There's replying in Portuguese. I'm getting the Japanese translation. I'm translating that to English, and then it's going back round between the three languages, you know.
Well, I mean, I've done, I think, one in-person interview with, Imanori, who we all sort of, a lot of people know because he sort of was the creator of the Imanori roll, the Imanori choke, and so he was actually in Winnipeg a few months ago, and I had the opportunity to meet him and interview him, and I remember that was my first time doing an in-person interview with a translator, because he doesn't speak very good English, and I found that difficult, but I couldn't imagine how difficult it was and still is when it's like a Japanese fighter and you're asking the questions and the translator. Like, I feel for you there.
Yeah, that was a tough one. That's what's known as being thrown in at the deep end. Although I was extremely nervous about it at the time, it was a great experience, and the learning curve was very, very steep. I have to say I wouldn't change that. That was a great experience.
It seems like you're a quick learner. Do you think having that experience in the cage yourself has helped with your commentary and helped you? I mean, obviously your knowledge of MMA is great, but I mean, you can't just be know a lot about MMA and be a great commentator. But do you feel like that knowledge of what it feels like to be in MMA or in the cage rather yourself? Do you think you've been able to sort of add that to your commentary and learn faster that way?
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, it's not, for play-by-play, it's not a prerequisite, but it's definitely a huge advantage. Yeah, for sure. It helps a lot. I'm used to analyzing my own evolution in MMA and others and guys I've faced and all the shows I've been watching over the years, all the Pride shows, and so to have that insight is invaluable.
I'm curious, how did you being play-by-play and not color come together? Because in the UFC particularly, we've seen a lot of current and former fighters do the color commentary. Daniel Cormier, Dominic Cruz, Dan Hardy, they, DC and Cruz as of late recently have been sort of additions to the booth. They're not doing the play-by-play though, so you've sort of had to master the craft of saying the advertisements, introducing the fighters, and sort of leading off and doing what a play-by-play person does. Why not color commentary, though, as a former fighter? Because, the color commentary, I feel like a former fighter, that's where they can excel, providing that insight that not everybody has.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Originally, I thought that I would be doing the technical analysis. And more the color commentary side of things. But just as it worked out, we didn't have, or we had some changes in the commentators at the start. One guy who was over here just on a temporary visa, he wanted to take care of the color side of things, so I was happy just to take the play-by-play role. And then from there, he wasn't able to stay. So we brought on Guy Delamont, who is one of our featherweights. And he has very good technical analysis and insight. He's still fighting, of course. So it just made sense for him to deal with that side of things and for me to take the helm as play-by-play.
So when did you move to Japan? I know just looking at your pro record, you've had, I believe, all your fights there. So it's not like you moved there for Pancrase. And honestly, before looking into your pro record, I sort of just assumed that was the case. So you got the job with Pancrase, moved there, but this happened way earlier.
Yes, yeah. I moved out here in 2001 to pursue my English teaching career. And I was really only going to stay for a year or so, just to see how, I would like it. And things worked out really well. I met Nobuhiko Takada in the first 6 months. I was invited to come and train at his dojo, fully sponsored, so I gave up my job and everything for that. And it was then really I thought, I could have a go at a pro career here and see, just see where it takes me. From there, all the opportunities with the TV, and then I started teaching at university, and then I met my wife, place, so stayed. So the progression from fighting into commentary was a natural one.
I find that interesting because we don't hear this story all that often where, a guy from Scotland just packs up his bags and moves to Japan. I mean, we don't see sort of the, not cross world. I mean, it's even more different or a bigger deal if, say, I was all of a sudden to move to Japan or somewhere in Asia. But, was it difficult to adjust?
Yeah, it's so different here. I mean, as a Scot or a Brit, if you like, traveling in Europe was nothing, all over Europe since I was a kid. So, being to foreign countries was nothing new, but Europe is only slightly different from Asia. And Japan is so unique. Even in Asia itself, it stands out. It's different. So it was a massive contrast coming over here. Just everything's different, all the street signs, you can't read them. And, and there's a lot more people speak English now, but, 18 years ago, very few, even in, train stations and public offices and stuff. It was, it was quite difficult and quite a culture shock. But of the people I know who move over here from the West, some stay 1 to 3 years, and the rest who can adapt and adjust, they stay longer. And I'm in that latter group. I loved it. Everything went well, and I embraced the language. And, the martial arts culture here is so deep and so passionate. I fell in love with the place.
You have to be adventurous, though, to just pack up your bags from anywhere in the world and move to such a different country. I mean, obviously moving from, say, Canada, where I live, to, if I was to pack up the bags and move to the U.S., that's no big deal. It snows there, and it's all the same, if we're being honest. Yeah. But it's such a culture shock, as you said, such a change. You have to be adventurous. You can't be a guy who's like a homebody or anything.
Right. Like Yeah, you have to kind of throw caution to the wind a little bit. And I wanted to live and work abroad ever since I was a kid, ever since I realized there was a world out there. Not that I don't like the UK or Scotland. It's a beautiful place. And, looking back, I was really lucky to have been born in such a beautiful place and grow up there. But I always wanted something different. I always thought in the back of my mind there was something different. There was something else out there that I should be doing. I can't ignore the things that I'm a little bit scared of, because everybody's scared of change. Everybody is scared of the unknown in a way. And to me, it was just just like the martial arts, really. You either face it or you ignore it. And for me, I wanted to get out there and face it and just see what it was all about.
Do you go back to Scotland every now and then to see family, or?
Yeah, we go back pretty much every second year.
Okay.
It's difficult with the kids and schedules and being so far, but I try to get back every couple of years. Yeah.
What do you miss from Scotland? There has to be something. I know, obviously, it's not a ton, or else you'd live there. You wouldn't have stayed in Japan, so you love Japan. But is there, like, one thing you can pick out that you wish you could sort of have the best of both worlds?
I guess it's my folks, my parents. At first, I've never been homesick in my life, wherever I went. But as I get older, they're getting older, and they're still healthy, they're still well, but you start to realize that they are getting older, and I'm not a hop and a skip and a jump away from seeing them. If I want to see them quickly, I can't. So that's the thing really that I miss the most. If there's one thing I have to say, it's my folks. Other than that, I don't miss the weather, that's for sure. I do miss some of the food, some of the traditional food, but the Japanese diet is just amazing. I mean, the variety and it's just incredible. It's much more than you realize as a tourist once you actually live here. The food is incredible.
Well, let's talk about this past weekend's card. You, of course, called it, as the play-by-play man, as you usually do. It was Pancrase 293. In the main event, we had... Well, the thing, I got to give a shout out to my colleague over at MMAsucker.com. I guess I kind of work there still, but nonetheless a good friend of mine. He's a huge just MMA fan, but he loves Japanese MMA, and he'll watch all the Rising cards. He'll watch Pancrase when he can. And if it wasn't for him, I got to be honest, I probably wouldn't. I mean, I'd eventually probably hear about it because it's such a great fight, but I wouldn't have thought about it really watching this card, just because a lot of all the Pancrase cards, it's just not convenient for a North American audience, and so a lot of times, like this one started right after the Machida Anders card, and so I've done articles. I'm busy, or not busy, but I was busy. Now I'm tired, go to bed, things like that, and then by the time the morning hits, you're doing other stuff, and by the time you know it, you're on to other events, because there's so much MMA going on. And so
Yeah.
I feel like with the Pancrase cards, I missed out on a lot of good MMA action, and luckily I did catch this main event. Sensei Ikeda, I'll probably butcher these names, but taking on Yuya Wakamatsu. What a fantastic fight this was. I felt like it was a little slow in the first 2 rounds, but by the third, these guys were just brawling. What was going through your mind? You have to keep it professional when you're calling these fights for the most part, but you must have been going nuts inside.
Oh yeah, I mean, you get very emotionally involved in some of these fights, especially big fights like a main event such as the Ikeda Wakamatsu fight. It is a difficult balance. Conveying to the audience what's going on and the feeling of it, but at the same time not getting too carried away. There was, a couple of moments in that fight where, had I just been watching at home, you'd be sitting there just speechless, unable to say anything. But I just have to keep going, be objective about it, and stay on point with the action.
You know these fighters more than I do, or more than most people, just because you have to research them and you're calling your fights. Was this? I mean, it sounded from the way you guys were previewing this fight, it sounded like this was supposed to be fun, but did this still exceed expectations? I would have to think so.
Yeah, well, it's funny because watching how they both got to the point where they're in this title match. Ikeda's defending his belt for the first time. Wakamatsu is making his first title shot. It's you get very involved in it emotionally. You know what's going on in the background, and on paper we knew that this was going to be a great fight, and it was highly likely that it would finish in the first or second round, or at least, by the third. And as you said, the first and second round were really just the fighters feeling each other out. They weren't being tentative, but because of their styles, because they attack from such a distance and they cover the ground so quickly, they're both similar in that respect. They're both very fast, and they're looking for the first contact. They're very sharp. They're very accurate with their strikes. So they know each other's danger. They know that things can turn sour very quickly with one well-placed strike. Even at flyweight, I mean, these guys hit hard. So it was really interesting to see how the challenger took this on, because most of his fights had finished very quickly. And Ikeda, being the champion, defending for the first time, how he was going to approach it. And I actually just rewatched it earlier, and the way Ikeda used his lead hand in those first 2 rounds, well, throughout the whole fight, to be honest, but taking control with his lead hand, not using a straight stick and move jab so much, although he did move to that later, but lead hook, covering the distance. He even threw a hammer fist, a standing hammer fist. He was throwing uppercuts with the lead, and he was throwing a kind of hybrid hook uppercut from another, 45-degree angle. That was his key to controlling the first 2 rounds. The third round was where it all changed. Well, admittedly, the second round, I think Wakamatsu's nose got broken, and his breathing was affected from there. So things changed in the third round. He came out, and Ikeda landed a hard right. And although Wakamatsu didn't look rocked, he didn't wobble, he didn't show any signs on his face, you could see it was a significant punch. And things changed from there in the third round. And then the fourth, of course, was just mayhem. It just all kicked off. And when Wakamatsu, he landed that right hand of his own, he'd been looking for that quite a lot. When he landed it in the fourth and knocked down the champion, Ikeda, yeah, it started to get wild. And watching how Ikeda dealt with that as a champion at that level of MMA, pro MMA fighting, was just astounding, because he took a lot of ground and pound after that, but he didn't even defend it. He was just intent on getting up. And he got up and put a hurt on Wakamatsu, and then coming into round 5, yeah, just the mayhem continued. It was outstanding.
Well, and I was super impressed, and I mean, I'm sure everybody was, with Wakamatsu, because he was the challenger, I'm sure the underdog, and it seemed like everyone was so high on Ikeda, but this guy's striking looked really good, and being the younger guy, what was the age difference? Was it over 10 or was it 8? I know it's pretty big, right?
Yeah, it's around
23 and 35 or something.
That's right. Yeah, well, Wakamatsu's I think he's just about to turn 23 in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so, I mean, it seems like Wakamatsu, I mean, nothing against Ikeda, the guy is a great fighter, but it seems like Wakamatsu, this guy has the future, obviously, because he's so young.
For sure, yeah. I mean, he didn't win the belt, but his performance was phenomenal. To come from having only been training in MMA for 4 years, to get to the level he's at is supremely impressive. And I think Guy Delamo on the broadcast said himself, we're going to see a lot more of him in the future, and it's super exciting.
Yep. Is it frustrating to you as a guy who represents Pancrase, is a fan of Pancrase? You, of course, work for them and commentate and all of this. You're so involved with all these fights. Is it frustrating that, let's be honest, at the World MMA Awards next year, about a year from now, this won't be up for grabs or a candidate for Fight of the Year, simply because it's not the UFC, it's not Bellator, it's Pancrase, which is still a popular organization, but just not as much in North America, despite its long history and the fact that you guys have done 293 shows, which is crazy. Is it frustrating that it won't get the recognition it deserves?
Well, I guess from an international point of view, you could say it was frustrating. I'm not particularly frustrated, because I've been here for so long and so deep involved in the martial arts world here that Japan really doesn't care. It doesn't care what the world thinks. It's going to keep doing its thing anyway. People say stuff like, when Pride went away and whatnot, that JMMA had died or was dying or whatnot. It never went away. It's never been away. It's always been hugely popular. Fair enough. We are enjoying a new boom here. There's a lot more money going into it, a lot more gyms opening up. The public interest is back in general. But although I would like to see more recognition from the international community, I'm just happy that Japan sticks to doing its own thing and doesn't bow down and try to be something else or copy something else.
Obviously, Pancrase will always have its roots in Asia and particularly Japan, but do you think it might be worth their while to break into the North American market a little more? Of course, they have Fight Pass, they have the TV or the online streaming deal, which is great. We have a way to watch it here in North America, but maybe doing one show a year in North America, do you feel like that's maybe not a terrible idea?
That's a great idea, and in fact, there is a show in Vegas in the works this year, possibly the summer after the summer. I don't have solid details on that yet, but it's in the works. So I'm really hoping that happens, because it'll be great for the MMA world and fans of JMMA around the world, but moreover, it'll be great for Pancrase itself to get more exposure to the North American audience.
I'm curious. You were born in Scotland, live in Japan for the past number of years. Have you been? Maybe a silly question, but I legitimately don't know. Have you been to North America?
I try to avoid it.
I don't blame you.
I was first there in the year 2000, the year just before I came out here. Actually, I went over for a month vacation to see a good friend of mine, and my sister was living over there at the time. Other than that, I've been to Hawaii.
That barely counts. Hawaii is beautiful, but
so yeah, I mean, there's more. Obviously, there's more on my hit list. I do want to see some of the bigger cities in the west and the east coasts. But yeah, I can't really say I have a lot of experience being in country in North America.
So never been to Vegas, I assume. So if you commented that card, that would be your first time there.
Yes, yeah. I'd love to do that. That would be fantastic.
It would be. I'm curious. You said JMMA is booming right now, and I kind of see your point about how some people thought it was down, and now it's kind of coming up. Is there any reason to doubt that it just keeps going up from here?
Not at all. I mean, Ryzen's doing its very best with the big sponsors, getting the Fuji Television Network deal and going out prime time on New Year's Eve. It is great. So they're doing their thing. And again, they do their thing. They don't really care about unified rules or the UFC or anything else. So it's great that there's a lot of individuality in the sport here. You've got Ganryujima, which is a moat fight event with very different customized rules. There's just so much going on. It's a mecca here.
What if you have to, as far as the next Pancrase event or an upcoming fight, what's something to look out for as far as Pancrase goes? Well,
Pancrase is continuing to put on high-level fights. And the great thing with the deal with Fight Pass and the connection with the UFC is, we can get fighters who are coming off contracts in the UFC. We can send our champions to the UFC if there's interest. The recently vacated welterweight King of Pancrase belt held by Daichi Abe, he got a deal with the UFC. He's an outstanding fighter. So you see the fighters here, they see that link, they see that connection, they see chances that other organizations here don't give them. So it's very exciting for them. And for Pancrase, we're just continuing to put on good fights in the weight classes we have, and the title matches never disappoint. You're going to have to look out for Takasuke Kume, the lightweight champion right now. When he defends his belt again, it'll be absolute fireworks.
I'm curious, as far as the size of Pancrase goes, I feel like some people don't really, let's look at one championship, for example. Like, that's huge, as far as I know, over in Asia, but we just don't, obviously we can watch one championship, but we don't hear as much about it in North America. Is Pancrase in Japan the UFC to North America? Is that how big Pancrase is in Japan, or is it a bit smaller?
That's how the fighters see it. It's their link to the world audience. It's big for them, and they know how big it is. And it's you can see the difference between the prelims, the undercard fights, and the main card fights. It's the same with the UFC. You see the difference in levels and how well the top of the divisions are doing. The good thing also about us is we have the largest number of fighters of all the organizations here.
So with that in mind, keeping in mind that Pancrase is huge in Japan, going by your words, and it seems like that. I mean, you guys put on a number of shows and obviously have quite the audience from the looks of it. Is there anything as far as what's going on in your life, career-wise, even non-MMA stuff, anything to complain about, any changes you want to make? It sounds like you're happy in Japan, happy with the English job, happy at Pancrase. Anything you want to sort of change moving forward, or are you going to, as far as you know, right now, nothing sort of in the works?
Yeah, well, my main focus is promoting Pancrase. I want Pancrase to continue its legacy and continue to grow and be the gold standard of JMMA. That's my focus. So, if I can relay that through my commentary and writing, then that's great. As far as moving forward is concerned, I would certainly entertain any opportunities to commentate for other international organizations.
Okay. Well, Stewart, it was a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, I should say. Great talking to you for the first time. Hopefully it'll be far from the last. Thank you very much for the time. Before we let you go, remind or let my audience know where they can find you on social media. Anything you'd like to plug, any shout-outs for anybody, any thank yous, anything you'd like to add? The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I have to always thank my partner in crime, Guy Delamo. He's an excellent fighter and a great partner to work with. I've always got huge thanks for the production team at Pancrase. They do an amazing job. The CEO, Mr. Sakai, the operations manager, Mr. Sakamoto, international handler, Shinji Nishimura. It's a fantastic team I have around us. As for myself, I really only started using Twitter seriously since taking the Pancrase job, but I do like the interactions with all the JMMA fans on Twitter. So yeah, you can find me S Fulton MMA on Twitter, S Fulton MMA on Instagram, and I'll continue to bring you the insights and knowledge from Pancrase and all of JMMA here.